Hello and welcome back to Lorcana Villain. My name is Baker and this is my complete Set 5 analysis. We're about 36 hours away from the Disney Lorcana Challenge in Birmingham, with of course the DLC in Vegas starting not long after that. I will be casting the event, which I'm very excited for, and I've been saying for a while that I was planning a video to do a deep dive into the complete meta so far and get some accurate data for like the best performing decks, and even go a little bit further and look at some specific counts for some of the more popular decks. I'm going to talk a little admin at the end, but I do want to push straight on. It is currently 10 to 10 in the evening, and I've still got to edit this. I've had a really mad week. I'll talk a bit more about it at the end, but I do want to push on. So, for a start, my sources. I'm using inkdex.com as my source for all information that I'm going to present during this video. A lot of these decks that I've taken into consideration we've covered on the channel, actually on a video, but I've also taken into account tournaments and events that I haven't covered. Basically, my tariff was I took all events with 30 or more players, which I think is a respectable amount of players from which to draw information from. So here is my first slide of data. I'm sorry it's not that fancy to look at. It's meant to be informative, but open to feedback as always, and I'll hopefully improve these if I do more of these sort of videos in the future. But yeah, I've input every single event that's taken place in Set 5 so far, all from inkdex.com. Every event over 30 players. There is one event here, the Cerberus Den, which was only 28 players, but I'd already reviewed it on the channel. Plus, I know that a lot of very good players attend Cerberus Den, so I still thought it was a good source to draw from. But then other than that, it's every event over 30 players. If it is over 100 players, then I have taken deck lists from the top 16 players. Anything less, then we've just taken the top 8. So you've got the locations here, the date, the amount of players, and then yeah, how many decks that we've got. So if it's blank, it means we've got 8 of 8. But obviously some decks, sometimes for an event, not every deck gets reported. And that's noted here, how many decks we've got of the amount that we would take from that event. So these two Toronto sides are over 100 players. So we would look to draw from the top 16. We've got 8 of 16 for the 8 a.m. event on Sunday, and 6 of 16 from the 9 a.m. event, and so on and so forth. I've also put which decks came first and second at those events. You'll see here Red Saber Games, I've put Ruby Amethyst, Ruby Sapphire in both. That's because they decided to split first. And if I've not put anything in the boxes at all, like the Brotherhood here and 3 Meeples down here, it means they split before top 2. So top 4 or top 8 just did a split, and we don't know who would have come first or second. And then down here, MaxCon, we've only got the first place because we've only got one list available from those top 8. So this is going to be further broken down. You see this highlighted area is what I'm calling the early meta, the first couple of weeks after the set was released. Because I do think there is a big difference between those first few weeks and then what ends up stabilizing later on. So I've broken this down into this, the early meta, and then anything past there is what is from the last couple of weeks, 3 weeks, what I would call more the settled meta. So this particular slide draws only from these events up here, so it's up until the 30th of August 2024, so ending with the Dragon Con event on the 30th. I could have done it the month, that might have sounded tidier, but these two events on the 31st were 92 and 62 players, which is a big pool of data, so I wanted to draw from that from our more settled metadata. So I've done it like this. So for these events up here that are highlighted, these are all the results. We've got each deck that made a top cut and the amount of times it was represented in top cut, and then how many times it came first or second. As you can see, for early meta, it was SteelSong that was the most superior deck above all, followed behind not so much by Ruby Sapphire. Both of those were definitely the top performing decks of the meta. Ruby Amethyst in 3rd place, and then Amber Emerald, Under the Sea, and Blurple were having a really good early season for Set 5. EA Tempo only having 4 tops, and that's a big change for what you're going to see when we show the more recent data, because again it was very not unplayable in Set 4, but it wasn't competing well. So I think it took a while for more players to come round to trying EA Tempo again for Set 5, and as time went on they were very much rewarded. Emerald Steel, obviously a huge drop off from Set 4, no huge surprises there. Amethyst Steel with some modest representation. The one on the left there is for more either aggro or just low to the ground builds. And on the right hand side of the graph, you can see we've got a Jafar variant as well, because I do think they're very different decks. So I did put them as a separate thing, and we had 3 of those that topped events in early meta. 2 tops for Sapphire Emerald, the blue cow, which is about as good as it got, because I think that number is 0 when we get to more recent meta. 3 Amber Amethyst Hyper Aggro. Again, it was very hyped, so it's no surprise a lot of people were jamming that. 4 Mufasas, and then only 3 Sapphire Steel, which is a very disappointing number for what I think is a very good deck. But yeah, again, this was just under 3 weeks of set 5 metadata. Obviously, people are jamming lots of different things, trying to work out what's good. Ruby Sapphire and Ruby Amethyst were already very good. SteelSong was good. It was in that top 4 conversation, but definitely the best deck for early set 5 meta, I would say. Moving on to our next slide for our more recent data. So this is going from Quest Tour, the 92 player event on the 31st, leading all the way up to Stupid Game, which took place on the 15th and is the most recent event, or at least that time of recording. So for the graph on the right here, I haven't added the most recent data to the earlier data. This is separate, and then I'm going to show you a slide in a minute where it's the entire meta all put together. But yeah, 158 decks looked at in total, and again, all this information is from inkdex.com. There will no doubt be some mistakes in this information, but I've put a lot of time into this. Like, this has been like 2 days worth of research, and of course there will be human error, but I stand by all of it. But yeah, I am confident this is an accurate representation, but again, feel free to fact check me on inkdex.com. But yeah, our very, very clear winner with 50 tops is Ruby Sapphire, along with 8 first place finishes and 7 second place finishes. This has definitely been Ruby Sapphire's best meta. It's been doing well for the last couple of seasons, but just look at these numbers, and like, again, a lot of that is just going to be the amount of people playing it, but that tends to be because it's beating a lot of decks and it's doing a lot of things well. So yeah, just an incredible late season for Ruby Sapphire. SteelSong also performing extremely well. 33 tops, 3 wins, 4 losses. Ruby Amethyst with 23 tops, only 2 victories, and no second places at all. Definitely, like, gone are the days where I think we say Ruby Amethyst is the best deck. It's still my choice to win either Birmingham or Vegas, but that's purely because I think the Ruby Sapphire decks are gonna do so well, and be so many of the top cut, and I think there'll be enough Ruby Amethyst there that I think Ruby Amethyst can have a pretty good Ruby Sapphire matchup. So I'm still banking on Ruby Amethyst, but yeah, definitely not its best season. But then moving on to EA Tempo now, 15 top cuts, 3 wins, 4 second place finishes, which is just an incredible jump from the last slide where it was just 4 tops and no finals whatsoever. So yeah, this deck feels really, really strong. I do think it's part of the big 4. I was saying, are we maybe in a big 3 meta? I was saying not too long ago, but yeah, EA Tempo is feeling super, super strong. Emerald Steel also having a bit of a better late season than I thought it would have, with 9 tops, only 1 win, and no second place, but still, that's quite a big jump from how it was doing early season, so showing that it's still a deck that can do very well. We've got 6 Steel Amethyst decks there. There's no Jafar list on here at all, no Jafar list topped events at all in this late season, but the low to mid-range aggro version still proving that they can do very well. Amber Emerald Under the Sea, still a respectable amount of tops, 1 win, 1 second place. Sapphire Steel with 5 tops, a little bit of a bump from the early meta, but still, it's a sad world for Sapphire Steel fans. Amber Ruby Mufasa sitting once again at 4. It will be there. There will be one that will make day 2, I'm telling you. Blurple dropping to only 3 tops overall, and no first place, no second place, which is a big drop off. I still think it's an okay deck, but yeah, its early season was definitely much better than its late. 2 Hyper Aggro there, also 2 Lemon and Lime aggro, which wasn't represented in the early meta, but a couple of them have done well in the late, and then 1 Emerald Ruby deck that has topped an event. And our final slide for showing the meta breakdown, we've got the entire breakdown from every event that has taken place for set 5, over 30 players. Of course, once again, this is only going off inkdecks.com. Some of the events the decks are missing, and there will have been other events that took place that never made their way onto inkdecks.com, but I do believe that the vast majority do make their way into the public eye, so I do think this is a big piece of that pie that makes up the overall data. We've got 244 decks. We've added both our previous slide totals together, and these are your final results for the best performing decks of set 5. Ruby Sapphire with 65 tops, 12 first place, 9 second place. SteelSong with 51 tops, 6 times winning, 5 times coming second. Ruby Amethyst with 38 tops, 2 wins, 3 second places. EA Tempo, 19 tops, 3 wins, 4 second places. Those are very clearly your big top 4, and then following behind the sort of, like, I would say B tier decks, I would say are the Emerald Steel, the low range Amethyst Steel, and the Emerald Amber Under the Sea decks. Those are what I would probably call your C tier. Followed not too far behind by Sapphire Steel Wheel, Ruby Amber Mufasa, and Blurple. And then moving down into the lower performing decks, we've got Amber Amethyst Aggro, we've got Amethyst Steel Jafar, we've got Emerald Sapphire Cow, Lemon and Lime Aggro, and that Emerald Ruby deck. So again, there's no real way to know what the meta is going to look like in both Birmingham and Las Vegas. But if we take this pool of data from events from the UK, from America, from Canada, from Italy, from France, from Poland, other places as well that I've forgotten, this probably makes up a large percent of the serious Lorcana players. So take this data as you will. But if I was playing Birmingham or Las Vegas, I would be looking at these two top 4 best performing meta decks from set 5 from this data: Ruby Sapphire, SteelSong, Ruby Amethyst, Emerald, EA Tempo, and focusing on them. And then you could even take it a step further and say, okay, I just want to worry about beating the top 2. Can I beat Ruby Sapphire? Maybe not, but I can beat SteelSong and Ruby Amethyst. These are the choices to make, and this is super late in the day. I wanted to get this video up sooner. Again, I'll do a little bit of admin at the end. But maybe you're still not fully committed to what you want to play, and this can help nudge you in the right direction. Maybe this gives you an idea of like certain builds that you want to play so that you can make sure you're beating these specific decks. Or maybe you're fully locked into a deck, but this is still just interesting information and probably what a lot of people already expect. And again, like a lot of this is what we've been sort of saying is the case, but this is the data all done for you. Now I do have 2 more slides for you. Now this is a much deeper breakdown into specific ink combinations and the exact counts that the amount of players were playing. This is all taken purely from the late meta data. So the data I'm about to go through with exact counts, it is taken from this specific block, the later on data, because I think that is more relevant. Like the stuff that's being played in the 3 weeks leading up to this big event, I think is a little bit different from what was being tested in the first 3 weeks. So for that reason, when compiling this, I decided to just go by the later metadata. From those deck lists, these are all the characters that were played. There are a couple of missing, which I'll reference at the end, but the majority of characters that come up in most players' decks, actions, locations, songs, and items. Over here, we've got how many players were using at least a copy of that card in their deck, and then how many players were using either 4, 3, 2, 1, and 0. There are some, as you can see, quite a few blocks missing. That's purely where I didn't want to overcrowd the graphs with data that wasn't necessary. So if we take Basil for an example, there was 1 player running a copy of Basil and they were running 4 copies. I didn't think you needed me to put 0, 0, 0, 49. So yeah, generally where I've left a block, it's information that you can suss out from the information that I have provided on that line. So yeah, you're of course welcome to pause. I'm also going to release these graphs on Twitter. But we will just have a quick glance over without going into too much detail. Tipo obviously being one of the most played cards from set 5. 39 out of 50 players utilising this. 11 people trying to use that Chicha. A few people using Gaston and Queen of Hearts for the early game. 39 players using the Sisu Daring Visitor, which is very strong. Only 2 players using the Emboldened Warrior. One of them playing 2 copies, one of them playing 1. 3 people were jamming the Queen Diviner, so that item build. Lots of Tylers. Obviously, the full 50 players are playing 4 Flavisham, goes without saying. Only 3 people using Bell. Kuzco here also proving to be a very popular card from set 5. 29 players choosing to use Kuzco. You may have noticed this graph just changed quickly. I noticed that it was 25 in the 4-off column, and it's definitely meant to be the 2-off column. But yeah, just over half the players utilising this to deal with locations and items, and it's a body as well. 7 people utilising the Scar Vicious Cheetah, which I think is super good as well at the moment. While the Lorcana said it best on their on one of their recent podcasts, that while people aren't expecting this Scar, it's super good. If I was playing red-blue, I would definitely jam a copy of this. 46 of the 50 players utilising the Empowered Sibling Sisu, 22 of them playing a 4 of, 19 playing a 3 of. And the last character I'll highlight here is Maleficent. 46 of the 50 players using her, 25 as a 4 of, 20 as a 3 of. If I was playing Ruby Sapphire and I'm expecting an awful lot of opposing Ruby Sapphire, I think I'm going up to the 4th Maleficent here personally. But yeah, those are the characters. Moving over to locations. 1 player using 1 copy of McDuck Manor, and that's the lot. Actions, 12 players using Develop Your Brain. 37 players using Vision of the Future, which I think is one of the best new cards in the deck. 22 players using 4, 11 using 3, 2 just using 4. Sorry, 4 just using 2. Yeah, this is a 4-off for me every day of the week. And then interestingly, 19 players opting to use Hide Away. No one using it as a 4 of, 3 people using 3, the vast majority, 12 players using 2, 4 players just using 1. This is a nice option, not only because it's a cheaper way of dealing with locations and items, but you can also use it on your own item early game if you miss ramp in a pinch. So that's interesting. A lot of brawls. Onto the songs, just 24 of the players using How Far I'll Go, just under half. So this really falling off in comparison from set 4 to set 5, but I still think a super good card. Most players using 2 of the 12 players using 2 of them. 1 jump ahead, 34 players using it, with 13 using 3 and 12 using 2. And then Be Prepared used by 44 of the decks. The vast majority, 22 of them only running 2, 9 using 3 and 7 using 4. So that may be something you want to take into account if you're sat across from a red-blue table. Obviously there's never a way to tell for sure, but if this data is anything to go, and if you're a numbers person, if you're making your decisions based on probability, then most red-blue players are just on 2, and maybe that's a reason why you as a red player want to move on to at least the 3rd, so that you, like, some people may make plays against you assuming you're only on the 2. And that's a big part of me providing a lot of this data and giving you this exact breakdown, is to help you look at these counts that you find interesting and make decisions yourself. And then moving, of course, onto Ruby Sapphire's item package. Ice Block, 43 players choosing to use that engine. The vast majority, 27 players going for the 3, but 12 players just going for the full 4 count. 10 players using Vitalosphere. Most players play 2 at 5. We've got 13 Rubichromicons, which is quite a lot just for that exert for a +1 strength for the turn. 8 players using 2 of them. The full 50 using Porpsicle, of course. 5 players utilising the Great Stone Dragon. 49 players using Fishbone Quill. I've got all the decks on my hard drive. If I've got time, I'll pop it on at the end so you can see which red-blue deck is not using Quill. 49, I'll do the same for Lucky Dime. And then 3 decks using Maurice's Workshop. Makes sense because there were 3 decks using the Queen Diviner engine. So yeah, 3 copies of that Shield of Virtue and 2 Fang Crossbow. I will highlight this particular deck here. This is featuring characters that aren't listed on the grid. King Candy, LeFou, Cruella, Triton, Prince John, and King Candy. It's because they never come up in any other deck. I've also missed off Maui's Fishhook, Poisoned Apple the Plank, Sword of Truth, and Potion of Might. The same is true. There are a couple more relevant cards that I've left off the graph. Like there was 1 player using Let It Go. But if at least 2 decks were using it, it's on this graph. And there's a couple of cards where only 1 player was using it, like the Ariel and the Hades, where I've still listed it. So yeah, that's your complete breakdown for Ruby Sapphire. And then my final slide, I would love to have had at least one more for you. I really wanted to do a Ruby Amethyst one because I do think that's also a relevant one to kind of know the counts, but I physically do not have time, so I'm really, really sorry. But these are our SteelSong decks for the late meta, so 33 decks that we're drawing our data from here. We'll just look at some of the rarer ones. So 13 players choosing to use the 1-drop Queen and the Floodborn. So that is a shift line that's very much fallen off for SteelSong, but is still represented by just over a third of the field. 19 players choosing to use the Daisy Duck Donald's Date, 8 players going for the 4 count, 7 players going for the 3 count, 3 players going for 2, and 1 player going for just 1, so expect to see that more than half the time. The Ursula Vanessa, very well represented, most commonly as a 3 count. Piglet Poo Pirate Captain, also well represented, 18 players choosing to use him, and 10 players using 3, so that seems to be the most common number. Also, Pete's Games Referee, a really game-changing card in this deck, in my opinion. 26 players utilizing it, 17 of them going for the 4 of, and 6 players using 3. Benja I've put on here, just 1 player using 2 copies of Benja. If you are running Steel, I strongly advise running a copy or 2 of Benja, especially if you're on SteelSong yourself. If nothing else, just to be able to interrupt the lanterns that have become quite popular for SteelSong, because it really helps you on the draw lantern. So Benja can really interrupt that, and I think you'll get a lot. Like, that'll be one of my top tips for the weekend. If you're running a Steel deck and you're not completely committed and you're just kind of umming and ahhing, consider Benja. 1 player using Doc, leader of the 7 Dwarves. Only 6 players using Lawrence, who was quite a popular card last set, but has definitely dropped off. Just 1 Alana Dale as well. I feel like if more people gave Alana Dale a chance, he could do very well. Another one of the best performing cards from set 5. We've got Prince Naveen. 30 of the 33 players choosing to use him. The vast majority going for the 2 count at 13 players. 9 players using 3, and 7 players going for the full 4 count, which has been something that DeCandio has definitely cheerleaded. We've got 28 players on the Robin Hood line out of the 33 decks. 2 players on the Chen Pao, 2 players on the Perdita, only 5 on the Tinkerbell Giant Fairy. She has definitely, like, this is the furthest I've ever seen Tinkerbell fall since the beginning of the game, which is sad to see. So yeah, don't expect it to pop up an awful lot. 5 Sonic Warriors, and then 29 of these players using the Stout-Hearted. 1 player playing the full 4 count. 1 Mad Lad, I love it. 10 players using 3, the majority being 16 players using 2, and 2 players using just 1. If you are running Cinderella Ballroom Sensation in your deck, which 32 players were of these 33, I would absolutely run at least 1 Cinderella Stout-Hearted. That would be one of my other top tips of the weekend going into this event, especially if you're planning on making day 2 and your opponent's going to see your deck list. Make sure that they have to fear that Stout-Hearted to a degree. Moving on to songs, we've got Bare Necessities here. 29 players choosing to use this super strong card, the vast majority using 2 copies at 19 players, 6 players using 3, and 3 players using the full 4. 2 players choosing to use Be Our Guest. We've got 11 players using World's Greatest Criminal Mind, 8 of them choosing to use 2 copies. Let the Storm Rage On and Strength for a Raging Fire, both 33 players out of 33 players. We've got a couple players here that are choosing not to play the full 4 though. Like, we've got 2 players running only 3 Storm, 3 players only playing 3 Strength. I think running 3 Strength is reasonable, even though it's inkable, so you might as well play it. But Storm at less than a 4, I'm not behind. Along Came Zeus. Expect most players to have 3 counts. Again, this is another one of those, if you are a numbers person, if you are sat against a SteelSong player, and your move really like lives or dies by whether or not they have that 4th Zeus or that 3rd Zeus, then maybe this is data that you want to draw from. If you're a numbers person, if you're someone that likes to play the odds, most players are opting for the 3. So if you've seen 3 copies, maybe take the risk. Only 5 of these players were opting for the full 4. We've got 33 out of 33 players on the Whole New World, 32 of them using 4, 1 player using 3. So no non-wheel lists have done well late sets. Not that have been reported anyway, just saying. Grab Your Swords, 24 players using this. No one using the full 4 count. count 1 player on 3, the vast majority being 15. So again, if you're a numbers person and you're making a move that lives or dies by grab your swords, if they've used 2, maybe feel a little safer. 7 players using Find 'em and Flatten 'em to get a lot of advantage in against the Ruby Sapphire decks or Sapphire Steel that you might run into. A couple of 0 to heroes, and then yeah, as I said, we've got 6 players using the Lantern. Again, not a huge part of this pie, but I do think this is probably the strongest way to run SteelSong. And even though this hasn't been hugely represented so far in the meta, I think, let's put it this way, it was only the other day that DeCandio released his newest SteelSong assessment video from Charlie Collectible Shows, where he talked to, like, I'm sure, I know he'd already talked about Lantern, and I'm sure like on his Patreon even more so, but I think for this big event with big players, I would expect a lot more people to be on this Lantern, and I'd be super interested to know. I'd love a complete meta breakdown of like just at least, well, we get it for day 2, but yeah, I would expect a lot of Lantern, and only 3 players using the Sleepy's Flute that has definitely fallen off. So take from this data what you will. To finish off, I am just going to go through 5 different ink combinations that I expect to be some of the best performing this weekend, and versions that I think are going to be the majority of those builds that you will potentially come across. So first off, Ruby Amethyst. I expect a lot of them will take this shell with a 1 Sisu and something along the lines of 2 Tremaine, 2 Bee King. You will get some. I'm going to show you another version in the moment that doesn't have any of the Bee Kings, but at least half of these lists. Again, I'm doing this as well because I wasn't able to give you a complete breakdown for Ruby Amethyst, but half of these Ruby Amethyst lists are running the Bee Kings, half aren't. Elsa is somewhat less popular, but she does crop up every now and then. But I still expect a lot of the Ruby Amethyst builds to take this sort of shell. And this will be the other Ruby Amethyst shell that I imagine a lot of players will draw from. This is for Kendall Burnett's version, using the 2 library, 4 Broom and 4 Chernabog. No Bee King. You may see 1 Tremaine, which I know when he went on to do the SCG Con, or SGC Con, he dropped a Medusa for 1 Tremaine, but still only 1 Tremaine / Bee King effect, and then a couple of counter library. And then for Ruby Sapphire, this version from an event in Italy, yeah, this is the general shell that I expect most to take. You're going to probably see 2 Be Prepared more often than not, 4 Vision of the Future. You might see a couple of How Far I'll Go. I think you're probably more likely to see 4 Sisu in more decks than not, but yeah, this couple of Kuzco could also be a couple of Hideaway, but yeah, this is a general Ruby Sapphire deck that I think, if you're against Ruby Sapphire, I would expect to build like this. Then for SteelSong, this is just Brennan DeCandio's list. I think this is probably, I think this is perfect, to be honest. I would probably go down to at least the 3rd Naveen. Even if it's wrong, it's probably something that I would do, but other than that, I just really like this. I think at least the 2 Bear. I really like the Lantern. I like this entire package. I'm a fan of the Queen line as well, but I think most versions that you come across will look very similar to this. Then for EA Tempo, I've got 2 builds to show you. This is probably my favorite one. The higher counts of everything looks a lot more consistent. I really like the 4 Lyle. I think Reckless is going to be super good over the weekend. I like this early package of Pegasus, Clarabelle, Chernabog, the Sir Hiss to be able to deal with Diablos and even when they're at the Cove, and it can just sit there and quest. Crabs for more board control. This Ursula package, Cow. Yeah, I think this list could do very well. I'm not a fan of the Arna, but other than that, I think this is a build that you'll see. And then this is probably the other version of EA Tempo that you will see around. This is like the Earlmeister toolbox package. So a lot more one-of. So expect maybe 1 Ruby Chromacon, maybe a small count of locations, a couple of Lyle, and just, yeah, like the Bonsai I expect to see a lot. But yeah, a lot of players have picked this deck up, so I expect some will bring it to a DLC. And the final deck that I think will be amongst the best performing ones is Amber Emerald Under the Sea. I've taken this version here, which I think is super good. You won't always see the Lucifers, even though I think it's a pretty good ad. But yeah, the 4 Bruno I think is super good for removal. The You're Welcome, so diverse. The Cove, so you can give more life to your Diablo, especially early game if you're against decks that aren't steel or just don't have evasive. So against some decks, they just can't answer an early Diablo at Cove. But yeah, I think this is super strong. I think Under the Sea and gives you great removal, which is not too hard to achieve. The discard package has always been strong. So yeah, again, when you're against Amber Emerald, I would expect most builds to take a shell like this. And that's it for my complete set 5 meta. So I super hope that this is helpful or at least interesting to people. Again, it's going up a lot later than I wanted it to. There's been a couple of things I wanted to get done this week that just haven't happened. I was meant to do a group podcast, which was all sorted. I had my guests and everything, but my schedule got too hectic, and I was meant to be doing a video and having Ed Templar, who's one of the new commentators for Birmingham. He was going to be guesting on the channel to guest on the channel, but I haven't been able to get around to that either. And yeah, I wanted to bring you a lot more information than this. I wanted to do a deeper dive into at least Ruby Amethyst, and then I was maybe going to do the same for EA Tempo. But yeah, this has taken quite a while to put together. I really hope it's been useful, and if it has, please do hit the like button for me on this one, because this has taken so much time, and there's been a couple of tournaments where I've not made videos covering the lists. I've prioritized like putting time into researching and developing this, which if this isn't well received in the future, I'm less likely to do that. I will just stick to covering the events. But if you found information like this useful and you would like me to do things like this going on in the future, like we're like coming up to Seattle, I could do it again for information from now up until that point. So if you would like that and you have benefited or at least found this information interesting, do please let me know. Hit that like button, leave a comment. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Again, feel free to screenshot these graphs and share them around. If you so wish, I'll also be sharing them on Twitter. It is now 20 to 11. I've still got to edit this, and I leave tomorrow for Birmingham. Thankfully, I don't need to leave until like 1 o'clock in the afternoon, because it's only a couple of hours away, which is lovely. But yeah, I cannot wait. If you're going to Birmingham, do please say hello if you see me. I'd be honoured and delighted. And if you're going to, and good luck. And if you're going to Las Vegas, I can't wait to get home and watch the whole event myself. But that's going to be it from me for now. Thank you so much for watching. If you're brand new to the channel, please subscribe for all things Lorcana. Hit that like button to show support, and we'll see you soon.